DigiBoost podcast series is organized by Digital Communication Network Armenia with the support of the Dutch VVD Fund. The series aims to strengthen the society's awareness of digital trends, highlight the importance of critical and creative thinking, promote high standards of digital literacy and accurate information, combat distortions and disinformation, and encourage responsible behavior online. Hello, my name is Diana Filimon. I'm Digital Communication Network Community Leader in Romania, and I'm very happy to be part of this project. Today I'm here together with my colleague Ciprian Cucu, who is a very passionate expert in disinformation, and he had the opportunity during this last year to have a lot of space to, unfortunately to get more experienced in monitoring disinformation. And as we can see, this year has been very much influenced about what we believe and what we don't believe, and whom do we trust and whom not. So today we are going to go through this elements, let's say, of what makes us tick, what should we do, how should we keep control of what reaches us as information, and how do we manage to keep people safe around us through information, through curating information.
Yeah, so I think there are some concepts that are already very well defined and have a lot of examples regarding information quality, let's say, and the opposite of which would be either disinformation or misinformation, depending on whether there's an intent behind it or not to mislead the audience. So my position on this is that understanding how this work can help people discern what's going on and act accordingly, because in the end, what we believe influences what we do.
So basically, we have seen like the perfect storm of disinformation this year. We started in fighting COVID, and disinformation hit that area very, very strongly and made people mistrust governments, mistrust specialists, and made people expose themselves to dangers because they didn't believe a certain source or because they believed certain other sources of information. And then we moved on, in the case of Armenia and Azerbaijan, to a real war where disinformation mutated into something even bigger than that, and it affected even more directly people's lives. And now we're in a point where we don't know what to expect next. I mean,
yes, that's one of the big issues in regard to disinformation, and I'm using this term in a general sense of some information that is not accurate, that either hides some of the facts, either invents some of the facts. The effects of this information can range, as you've said, from direct, immediate impact. We've seen a lot of discussion regarding wearing masks, if we are to consider the COVID pandemic. Or it can have some effects that are somewhat subtle in a way, and that's mistrust in the government, mistrust in the media. That's very interesting. And in the end, there's general mistrust in democracy itself that's growing, unfortunately. So authoritarian leaders have benefited from that, and they have found ways to sort of weaponize this information to suit their goals. So in that sense, I think it's very dangerous, even if we don't really realize it at any moment. So I think that one starting point in all discussions about information is what is truth, actually. So we need to start from that question, because we need to, at some point, get to the same reference, to have the same understanding of objective reality. If we don't do that, we might find ourselves into parallel discussions. There was a very interesting conversation that Sam Harris had with Jordan Peterson, in which they got stuck in this exact particular point to define what is truth and what constitutes proof. How can I prove that something that I say is true, or something that somebody else says is false? And that's sometimes can be a very difficult thing to solve. But the proof is necessary. Just claiming something happened is not enough to consider that as truth. And I think it's especially important now, because we are living in what's called post-truth environment, in a post-truth society. And this is just an interesting way of saying that, unfortunately, for most of the people, for a large part of the public, information doesn't really matter in a sense of providing data or providing facts, but it's just used to reinforce some beliefs that are already existent. That's the main idea. That's the main problem, that we, unfortunately, for various reasons, don't seem to care that much about what is true, but we care just to be right.
But now we are not. It's an ideal situation where we can really discuss and philosophize around this, but the situation has gotten a bit out of hand, and now we are seeing that when we say war, it doesn't mean just a line on the ground between two sides, but it means also other countries getting involved. It means tweets and comments and wars on Twitter or Facebook, and it means using them as tools to discourage the other side, to target another one, to lie or exaggerate some things. So disinformation has become a weapon that's very clear, and in the real sense of the word.
Yeah, of course, we've been using this terminology of hybrid warfare for some time, and hybrid warfare includes an information component. In some sense, this is not necessarily new, because we can remember even from World War II that they were dropping leaflets from planes and trying to convince your own population of the righteousness of your own actions, or to convince your enemy population that they are on the wrong side of history. So what's changed, of course, is the digital environment, which allows the parts that want to influence opinions to get to a much wider audience in much easier. And that's happening, of course, and it connects to that idea that it doesn't really matter if you can prove anything, but how can you touch people on an emotional level? And when you are able to do that, then you kind of sow this sort of belief in what you want them to believe.
And for example, I saw that it seemed a bit easier, let's say, when you have a real war. It's like two sides, you're on one side or the other. But in the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, I saw a lot of discussions generated by other countries.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit in?
Well,
why do other people care about other people's work?
Because we are on a global stage. There's no such thing anymore as a local conflict. I mean, we are in Romania and we're watching the US elections and we're watching the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh and we're watching the situation in Belarus and
Moldova.
and so with this digital environment there are no longer any borders in that sense. So people are interested in all kinds of things. And of course, when you look for examples, I've also seen exactly what you were saying. There was one tweet on the Armenian, I think it was an official account of some sorts. And of course, they had their own story about how they will protect what they see is their land. And what I found interesting was that in the answers, in the comments, most answers were from Turkish people. So, of course, what was happening there is that there's also a Turkish agenda, and people were reacting to what the Armenians were saying by putting pictures of tanks and of planes and kind of contributing to that image that the Turkish government wants to create for itself, and that's a very important player with a very important military that will, in the end, have something to say about what's happening in the region. So yes, that was very interesting, and I think that there was another interesting article that the Azeris had at some point a troll factory, it took more than a year to prove and to shut it down. So Facebook managed to delete those accounts, but it turns out that they did have that thing, and this brings us back to the idea that some regimes can learn to use these information tools to their own purposes.
And you were mentioning the fact that in some tweets they were answering with photos, which have a very important effect. If I was an Armenian and I saw a Turkish guy posting pictures with tanks, I would definitely feel offended and threatened. But they know exactly how to use this, because we can't assume that those are only regular people expressing their opinion on Facebook or on Twitter. They are people from organized to push certain buttons. What are those buttons, those loaded words? What should people be careful about?
So I think that each group, each country can use various ideas to promote their interests. We call them narratives because people need stories to understand the world around them, right? You vote for one politician because the story in your head about how that politician got there, what he did, what he's gonna do, makes you sort of trust him, or at least not distrust him as much as you distrust the others. So it's the same thing here. All sides have narratives. Narratives are not positive or negative on their own. Of course, it matters if the narratives are built on truth or are built on cherry-picking facts or on hiding some information or on inventing some information. In that case, the narratives, of course, are disinformation narratives, and they are used as part of a strategy, this hybrid warfare strategy. But going back, we can see the narratives if we follow the communication of each side. For instance, Armenia had this interesting narrative that they are the most democratic country in the area, which may be true. I didn't check each statement particularly, but it seems to be the case based on the ratings that they've had in the last period of time. On the other hand, Azerbaijan claims they are the victim because by international law the territory was theirs, and they started having this narrative that was very interesting, created to try to emphasize the idea that it's not about religion. Because one of the first ideas that you had were, okay, Armenians are Christians, the Azeris are Muslims, so that's a religious conflict in a sense.
Especially in this situation.
With the Turk people coming in, and as a parenthesis, the Pakistanis were also joining against Armenia in the comments. So again, a Muslim country that wanted to have a say in all of this. And what the Azeris did, I found very interesting in their official communication, was to insist that it's not a religious issue and that they are actually very diverse and very open to everybody to practice their own religions, and they don't really care about that. Again, I have no way of knowing whether this is true or not. It's just interesting to see how they want to be perceived. And it's an interesting thing also I found in a report that both sides claim to have a sort of monopoly on truth. So each side says, okay, no, this is how things are. No, you're wrong. This is how things are. So it's very difficult to understand this, but what you can do is to see communication of this type for what it is. And what it is propaganda in the end.
When we talk about spotting disinformation or spotting the narratives between two very definitely separated countries, it's easy. It sounds easy because you can't be against your own country. And it's totally understandable. Once your country is threatened in any way, you tend to rally around the flag. And I'm pretty sure we would do the same thing if we were in that case in Romania. But when disinformation is spreading from inside your country and it's trying to split people in various groups and to make them not quite understand what's happening, so certain people can profit or take advantage from the situation, then it's a very blurred line and it's a very gray area, because it's easy to hate a stranger, but it's very hard to understand whom should you hate from your own country.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation, and to some extent I think this connects to a sort of a shift in the purpose of disinformation. And for example, back in the 80s, even in the 90s, everybody was trying to create their own truth and convince people of that truth. Now it doesn't matter that much. Authoritarian figures are better served if there's confusion. So they're not even trying to convince you that, what they say, so their narrative is the correct narrative. But they just put out the messages to confuse people and to get them to think we may never know the truth. And that is a real danger, because that is directly connected to diminished faith in the institutions, not particularly some politicians that have a place in those institutions at some point, but the institution itself. It undermines democracy directly because it's very obvious. Democracy means informed choices. If you do not have that basis of information, what choice can you make? What will you base your choices on? If you base them on your emotions, well, you might not choose the best thing for you and for your country.
And if you could sum up, let's say, I don't know, 3 or 5 or 4 steps guide for a citizen in a country where things are shaken, let's say, and disinformation could harm people, could reshape the future of the country, could, I don't know, do incredible things. But we have to talk to each citizen in particular, because each of us, each and every one of us is making, or for Armenians, make a decision when they choose what they believe or not. But coming in their help, what would you sum up to be as a very short guide of how to keep yourself and people around you safe? And
yeah, so first of all, I would think that it's important to have the ability to recognize that we might be wrong. It's not every time that we are wrong, but just considering the possibility that we might be wrong in some cases is a step in the right direction. Otherwise, we get a very polarized society in which everyone that doesn't think like you is the enemy. So then, if you acknowledge that you might be wrong, or what you believe in some cases might not be exactly accurate, when you consume some information, when you read a tweet, when you read a post, anything, you have to ask yourself, is this true, or do I just want this to be true? Because everybody has this predisposition to consider more information that confirms the person's beliefs. It's called confirmation bias. It's proven. So we have to be extra careful to not do that, to not only consider information that confirm our beliefs. Then the third step would be to really try to engage with the opposing side. And I understand that this might be difficult because they are, opinions may be radically different. They press on emotions a lot, so you get angry or you get scared or both. But it's very important to try to answer not because of a reaction, but answer as, a rational thought that tries to understand the position of the others and tries to understand the truth at the heart of the issue. Because if we let ourselves get riled up, if we let ourselves be emotional and respond to pictures of tanks with our own pictures of people destroying tanks, that's just playing into the game that others are probably setting up.
And should we I think it's pretty hard to advise people not to buy into news that bring emotions, because pretty much this year every piece of news brought some emotion, not the good type. So if you find something that pushes all your buttons, as you said, scared and angry, and the same, just first breathe, then assume that you can be wrong, And what else?
So it's good if you want to go to more steps. It's good to understand what the narratives are. This implies that you sort of go outside your own bubble.
Read the comments or not?
That's a very good question. It depends on the person. If you're very emotional, maybe you should avoid the comments.
The devil lays in the comments, basically.
Exactly. Because sometimes comments are just sort of flame war, or they're not necessarily bringing any information. It depends where those comments are and who's doing the commenting. Of course, on Twitter there are a lot of bots and trolls, so maybe it's best to just keep out of that and
look for other sources also.
Yeah, try to follow sources that are reliable. In many places there are these sort of independent fact checkers, independent organizations that do fact checking, and sometimes they even create a sort of media map, so then you can see if a media organization is close to one side of the issue, or how well they report the factual information.
And always keep an eye, I would say, on the other side. Always leave on I don't know, a website or a TV station which has completely different beliefs than you have. Keep it close and just, I don't know, listen from time to time just to check.
Yes,
the other side.
One thing that I usually suggest, even when I have this kind of courses in critical thinking, is that there's one ideal in any debate, and that ideal is that one can represent with his own words the argument of his opponent. So you have to be able to say what the other person is saying with your own words in such a way that the other person would say, yes, you're exactly right, that's what I'm trying to say. If you do that, then that's the first step in you actually understanding the conflict, because in many cases the conflict is actually because of misunderstandings, right? I'm saying something, you're saying something, but we're not actually listening to each other, we're not understanding each other, we're just waiting for our turn to talk and to double down on our ideas. But when you do that, when you are able to express the opposing argument, then you can start to contradict it, but based on the truth and not based on a caricature of that argument. I think that's very important.
So with that being said, I think we can, hope we helped in some way. People shed more light on disinformation, and we are living very, very, very troubled times around the world. But we need to be careful, and we need to pay attention more and question even ourselves more, probably.
Yes.
In order to keep the other ones.
Look for the
us.
truth, even if it contradicts you. Admit that you might be wrong also, and try to understand what the other parts are saying. That's just the basics.
Thank you, Ciprian.
Thank you.